trying to be less awkward whilst plugged in. Right. Hello, new Bull Breed podcast listeners. This is going to be season 2 of Bull Breed podcast with my new co-presenter, Libbi. So season 1, I was doing all guest interviews, and as that is super fun and we'll still definitely be doing that. But we wanted to make a new format for season 2 where it's the two of us, seeing as you have now joined Bull Breed Behaviourist and are arguably the most prominent member currently. So wanted to get you in on the podcast as well, and also created a YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hi. If you're listening, you can also watch on YouTube if you want to. Tell me about your week, Libbi. What have you been up to?
Oh, this week's been a busy one. Lots of London this week, which is always the way.
Yeah.
I was in London on Monday and on Thursday, and I was in Reading on Wednesday. And then I was local in Dorset yesterday. Yeah, I had a really good week, actually. Mixture of clients, few bull breeds, as always. Spaniel on Friday.
Nice.
Yeah.
We're used to that because we've decided that your bull breed actually is a spaniel.
Yeah, I think Arlo might be masquerading, actually, as a bull breed. And actually, he's just an undercover spaniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly dog reactivity this week. But to be honest, that probably is about 80% of current clients, which is fine by me because that's my favourite.
I always love dog-to-dog stuff.
Yeah.
Which is good with bull breeds.
Yes. It's one of our questions, actually, isn't it, from followers?
Yeah. We've got some... So this new format will be working through some listener questions. People can send it to us on voice note or just send them over Instagram. Yes. It's the easiest way to send some questions over. But we've got some questions that we're going to go through today.
We do.
But Libbi, if anybody doesn't know you, who are you? Why do we look like we've both been training in the rain?
So we have both been training in the rain. Normally we look a lot more polished than this, don't we?
I don't think
No.
That's
not true. Just we've got an excuse today. I'm Libbi. Yeah, 2 truths and a lie. I'm Libbi. I work full-time with Bethany, doing dog training, behaviour, GRC. I am owned. That's like always what people say, isn't it? I'm owned by a Staffordshire Bull Terrier called Arlo. And he was actually 3 last week. So some may, I know, I actually forgot until like in his like puppy WhatsApp group, someone messaged like, happy birthday to all the dogs today. I was like,
so he didn't get a cake?
He did not get a cake this year. I feel like I'm really like lowering expectations every single year. Last year he did get a cake. First year he got a birthday party. Yeah. So some might say I'm actually through the worst of it now, out the other side of adolescence.
Maybe. You might hear...
Prime time, he's like drinking water now. It's great.
We've got both my Exempt pit bull type Judge in a crate behind camera, and Arlo is in the other one. So you might hear some dog noises throughout, but hopefully you guys are all used to that. So
obviously no whining because they're impeccably well crate trained.
Yeah.
Just some chewing and drinking.
Chewing and drinking. And the odd snore, maybe. Right. Shall we start with our first question?
Let's do it.
What's our first question? Go on, Libs.
We've literally got so many questions. We're going to try and get through as many as we can within our allocated hour or until our microphones run out of battery. Yeah. Either or. But we'll start and we'll just get through as many as we can. Question number 1. What indoor stuff would you recommend for bullies who can't get out as much due to not liking the muzzle? So that's like probably coming from the angle of primarily XL bullies who have obviously got to be muzzled now in public, but equally could be relevant for other dogs that need to be muzzled for various reasons.
I guess it's primarily the XL bully ban has made dogs' lives change almost overnight. So whereas it might be a more gradual transition for dogs that are reactive or whatever and they're being muzzled for scavenging or something, they might have gone from being off lead and muzzled to now being on lead and muzzled. So I guess the first thing is that most of my training with Judge, and I'm sure yours with Arlo, starts indoors and starts in the garden if you've got a garden. But this is like a perfect time to start some new training, because you can start doing anything that you want to, really, from inside the house. So we love training our dogs, and we think everybody should do a little bit here and there. Not every dog needs high levels of training, but to stimulate their mind, and if they're struggling with the restrictions, then just start doing some training. So I like doing stuff that's around me, because I'm really trying to I obviously have an exempt dog who
does have to be muzzled outdoors.
Have to be muzzled outdoors. So actually I prefer doing the training from indoors, because it's a lot harder to teach new concepts when the dog's got a muzzle on. So I like to do a lot of my stuff indoors or in the garden. I like training stuff that's around me as well. So I like doing things like a middle or side, and teaching him to like go around my body, luring. I'm obviously a big fan of luring. I'm sure we'll get to your preferred method of training, because we will. But that's what I enjoy doing with Judge. I like doing training-y bits, place training, things that are easy from within the home. I haven't really started doing much scent training with him yet, but I'd really like to. And so you're going to teach me to do some scent training, because it's definitely not my forte. But you do a lot of that with Arlo, don't you? Yeah,
I love it. I think it's a really good like balance, particularly if you're doing like some more high arousal stuff, like with your bully, whether that's like indoors at a secure field or in the garden, like, you know, flirt pole or tug, or you're doing like dog sports, like obviously we've got GRC. And, you know, obviously that's quite physically exerting, like it's quite high arousal. So I think balancing that with scent work, which is like kind of equally as like mentally stimulating, but different. It's tapping into sort of a different arousal level. And I think I really want to do even more with Arlo. Like I think it's really good for him. He's a bit fizzy.
Yeah. What have you trained him on?
So I've trained him so far on a red Kong. There's a lot of different ways that you can teach the indication, which is essentially where the dog basically tells you that they found the article. And obviously they can do that in lots of different ways. They can either freeze over it, they can sit next to it, they can lie down next to it, they can bark at it. Like you can kind of shape it to be what you want it to be. But I find with like bull breeds and terriers, they really enjoy like the actual, obviously they're not a retrieving breed. So you can obviously do it as a retrieval, where the dog will collect the item once they found it and bring it back to you. So if I'm working with a Spaniel or a Labrador, then I might incorporate that. As that's, you know, obviously ticking another box for sort of biological fulfillment. But with terriers and bull breeds, I think they actually really enjoy the fixation. So there's a few ways you can teach that. So I started with that. I then started with the Kong, obviously as a whole Kong. You can also just do things like build a positive association to the red Kong, which some dogs have a head start in, because if you've actually already used the Kong as for enrichment and put like tasty stuff in it, then they've already got a positive association to the Kong. And then you'd obviously just want to build on that and get a strong indication. And then obviously making it smaller and smaller. And then I use like little tins. So like they've got like little like holes in them. It's probably not the technical term for it, but and teaching the dog to actually discriminate between the two tins, like that look identical, but one obviously has the Kong pieces in it that have been chopped up. And so you can basically boil your Kong and then chop it up into little pieces, put some in a tin, and then in the other tin that doesn't have anything in, and then you only reinforce them for indicating over the tin that actually has the Kong in it, so that they're actually actively seeking out the scent. And then you can obviously start doing searches. You can obviously do like easy ones to start with, where like, you know, you put your dog into a down or tell them to down their place, and then you walk a few steps and put the piece of Kong down on the floor. So they've like seen where you've put it, and they're also following like your track that you've left. And that's a good way to start adding like your cue to tell them to go to search for it. And then obviously you can make it harder. So you can obviously do it blind, so they're like behind a board, or they're like, I don't know, in the doors, and you go and hide it somewhere in the garden. Again, starting at ground level, and then you can make that harder and put it like higher. Like I like to put it in like little holes in the fence or underneath things. And then obviously you can go from there, and you can start like teaching indications on like oil, for example, like truffle oil, gun oil.
Get some truffle hunting dogs that might make us a bit more money.
Yeah. That would be handy.
Can we start doing that with Arlo, please?
But like scent work is quite broad, really, because that's like one element of it. But like a very simple way of doing scent work is just to do like a scatter feed. I don't necessarily think that it's quite as taxing mentally, I don't think, like just searching out for food, because obviously the dog is just sniffing out food, which comes naturally to most dogs. So to actually teach the dog the process of almost an indirect reward, so it's like they're not sniffing for food, they're sniffing for something that if they find it, you will then mark them when they're indicating over the article, and then they must come to you to get their reward, let's say. But I think it's really good for dogs that need to build a bit of independence as well, because they're actually working away from you, but then can come back to you to get the reward. But then even things like man trailing, which is like really taking off, is kind of a form of scent work, because it's like simulating search and rescue, really, isn't it? They're having to seek out. Yeah. I mean, I don't do it personally, so I don't want to misquote exactly what it is, but you're searching for someone, aren't you?
Yeah. Is that the same as tracking? Oh, no, it's not, is it? Isn't man trailing, they're scenting the air, tracking, they're scenting the ground, searching for the person?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
But it's not our forte, let's be honest. But I would love to try that with Arlo, definitely. And I think that's a really good activity that a dog can do in a muzzle. There's nothing to stop a dog doing that in a muzzle. No. So as long as you've obviously got an open-minded man trailing instructor near you, then you shouldn't have an issue doing that. And equally builds up quite a positive association to the muzzle as well. Yeah. Something to take their mind off it. But yeah, I love scent work. You can do it indoors, you can do it in the garden, you can do it in a secure field, you can do it on a walk, you can do it muzzled, you can do it unmuzzled, you can do it anywhere. I like a simpler version of that as well, for people that aren't necessarily wanting to get super into scent tracking or scent work. Just hiding a bit of food under a cone, like getting the dog to tell you which one the food's under, and then you lift it up and food, like exactly.
Just little things. I think the biggest thing that has helped me with judges training has actually been, I've taken it from you, using his meals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit gross. He's fed raw, so got the old gloves.
Yeah.
And end up covered in blood sometimes.
You really do, actually.
Yeah, well, judges, because it's the muzzle as well, so I'm just raw through the muzzle, and then he's like getting it all over me. So yeah, no, it's gross, but it has really improved his enthusiasm and his desire to be training. But I know it's a little bit controversial, like using existential food, but it's not like if he doesn't train, he doesn't get it. And it's not every single meal. I'll often leave a little bit in the bowl for him, or I'll give him a bit first and then we start but I found that really I think
helpful. When your dog is fed raw, it's like obviously extremely high value. So definitely for Arlo, it's the highest value food I could give him, like even ham or chicken or anything is just not going to match up to raw food. So I think the enthusiasm for which he works for raw is definitely greater than the enthusiasm with which he works for pate. Yeah. You know, like being totally honest. So yeah, I still use some of it. But like you said, obviously if we don't get through it all, then it just goes in a bowl and he eats what's left. It's also kind of given me two IFB judgments. Yeah, it's giving you that structured time almost.
Yeah, like those two opportunities. And for people that don't know, Judge doesn't live in my house. He lives in like a workshop attached to my house, because I mean I haven't actually been through his story on the podcast before, I don't think. Maybe I haven't done one since I've got him.
God, shall I write that down, add it to our to-do list?
But basically he was seized by police at 3 days old and lived in seized dog kennels until he was nearly 5. It's coming up to a year now that I've had him. But he knew nothing. Absolutely nothing. He travels around with me when I go travelling for work, and we stay in hotels and Airbnbs. And
well, you even had to teach him his name.
Oh, well, I did.
Because you changed his name.
I did change his name. His name was Sid before, but he definitely didn't know that, and I wasn't going to use it.
No. Don't think he looks like a Sid?
No, I don't think he looks like a Sid. I was initially thinking of calling him Boss, because he's Boss Eye.
Yeah.
But then I was a bit like, Boss, don't know. I liked Judge. Yeah. People judge bull breeds. I went through court, so I had to go and speak in front of a judge. A judge allowed me to keep him.
Very fitting.
There was a lot of things. And I just thought it was a cool name and didn't know any dogs with that name. And having worked with dogs for like nearly 15 years now. I can't do the maths. I think it's nearly 15 years. since starting, and I hadn't known a judge. So, I mean, I had this struggle with naming my child. Every name I thought of, I was like, oh no, I know a pug called that. Or I did have a really lovely friend that named her child Bruno, and sorry if you're listening, but I was like, I knew too many American Bulldogs called Bruno. So I just ruined every name. I'm sure teachers have the same
same problem, yeah.
But so with naming judge, I was like, I want to name him something I've never heard before.
Yeah.
And I think there were probably a couple about. But anyways, that's Judge's story in a nutshell. So I've had to teach him absolutely everything from scratch. He knew nothing. And he'd also just gone from kennel to field to kennel to field, had never been out of that environment. So we've had loads of environmental stuff to do, everything. Travelling with him to an Airbnb, I have to tether him to me because he's just, as you've seen, he is just like a whirlwind into everything.
Just into everything, yeah.
He knocked over your amaretto sours.
He did knock over my amaretto sours. I have just about forgiven him.
Just about. He's just clumsy into everything. But my point was initially is that he lives in this workshop attached to my house, which is like fairly small, but it's bigger than a kennel he would have had. And it works with the fact that I've also got 3 other dogs and a child, and I've had to do slow introductions and blah, blah, blah. So that's where he lives. So we have a small space to practice in, but most of the training that I do with him has been taught in that small space.
Yeah.
So don't let that limit you. I just use his food. I get him. I've started working on the indirect rewards, which I'm sure we'll get to at a different point. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I can now get him to do stuff for his food bowl as well. So I can get him to do, whereas before he'd only take it from my hand, he like, no comprende if I was trying to get him to do anything before because he was so like wanting to get to his food.
Yeah.
But I'm now breaking through and getting a little bit more clarity from his thinking, so he can actually listen to me when he's in that highest state of arousal, when he's so excited for his food, which is then bleeding into other things as well. So I just think it's such a, like, for us has been massively beneficial.
Yeah.
But yeah, starting any training you can do inside, scent work. I mean, there's obviously all puzzle feeders and enrichment and stuff, but it's not that it's not our vibe. I just think I would rather do some training with my dog for 5 minutes than give them a puzzle feeder that's going to take 5 minutes, because then that puzzle feeder essentially just becomes another bowl. Yeah,
I think it's only really enriching like the first couple of times you do it. Yeah. I think you have to rotate that stuff a lot, and they're expensive, and you can come up with your own puzzles. Like my favourite puzzle is free shaping, which I personally think is a great indoor activity. You don't need lots of space to do it. You can use your imagination. Like you can do it inside.
I tried for a couple of minutes.
I've done it with Judge. Judge loves it. I'll just free shape Judge and you lure him.
I did. I tried for a couple of minutes to shape him, putting his paws up on something, and I was like, do you know what? If I just tell him like,
if you just lure him,
just did it,
he'll understand.
And he did it again. Anyways, carry on.
Yeah, so I just think it's just a difference, so that you don't need to necessarily have one or the other, but it's just it's obviously using like slightly different like parts of the brain in terms of like them having to actually work through stuff and problem solve and not essentially following food, I suppose, which obviously has its place. I do really like luring as well, the behaviours that need precision, but I think for like fun stuff like tricks, there is a benefit in shaping, even if you're never going to use the thing ever again. It's more the learning process that I think is like quite fun and quite mentally stimulating. So as long as you've got like a word that your dog knows means, yes, you've got it right, collect food from me. So that could be like you just saying yes or having a clicker. You can shape like anything you want. So something even as silly as like ringing a bell with their nose or ringing a bell with their paw. So you'd pick what you want the behaviour to be. It's a bit like the hot cold game for humans, and then you just capture, like using your marker or your clicker, small approximations towards like the end goal. So one of the first things I shaped with Arlo was wrapping around an object. So you just place the object out, the dog goes to investigate it as a novel object, which it will, you mark that, and then you start increasing your criteria. So actually he'd have to sort of like almost like wrap his head around it, and then you'd mark that, and then he'd start walking around it, and then you'd mark that. And if they get it right, you can give them a jackpot. And then when they're reliably doing it, you can put it on a queue. And then that is actually something that you can then take outside if you've got it on queue and ask them for it in different environments. But it's not really necessarily about that. It's more about it's something fun to like do together. Mm-hmm. So that I think is good. Yeah, so training with like luring, training with like shaping cool shit that you might never actually use, but just for the fun of it. Scent work, obviously tug. It depends, like, in terms of like when, obviously, whoever's asked that question, indoors, like whether you have access to a garden or not, because I understand why some people might not want to play tug in the house. And to be honest, if you have the luxury of having an outdoor space, I would probably suggest to stick to outdoors playing tug, so that you can keep your lounges for lounging and outside is like for more high arousal stuff, just to help the dog to like be calm within the house. But if you don't have that luxury, then like you could have a room that you like play it in, or just make sure you've got a really clear start cue, really clear finish cue. So playing tug. If you've got a garden, again, flirt pole's another excellent thing you can do indoors. Indoors, I say, like you wouldn't want to do it in your living room. I mean, unless you live in a mansion.
Even so, I mean, even with tug, you've got to be careful about flooring as well.
Yeah,
make sure
slippy flooring.
You don't want to do that on slippy flooring.
No,
just on carpet.
But yeah, for those that have got gardens or like the space to do it in, then tug and flirt pole are definitely great additions. But yeah, your more indoor stuff will be like more of your training and more of your free shaping, and you can do scent work indoors. What else can you do? Things like massage. Like, I know that's not really like necessarily what you'd have in mind when you think of like an outlet as such, or like fulfillment, but I think there's a lot to say for that in terms of like connection with you and your dog, or even like strength and conditioning stuff, like, because that's not really high arousal, so you could do that like indoors without blurring the boundaries between like, this is our calm place. But yeah, just things like proprioception, like, which is basically like the awareness of the hind end. So getting the dog to, you know, use its back legs and not just its front legs, and sidestepping and, you know, rear foot targeting. So putting their back feet up on things, like all that, even just their front feet up on things. Like some dogs even, you know, struggle to do that. But getting those balance pods and getting them to put all four paws on like different balance pods, strength and conditioning is like really good. Again, that's good for them like physically in terms of like their fitness, and also good for them mentally. And again, it's just still bonding, isn't it, between the two of you? So for bullies in particular, it's like social, like time with you. That's not just you like sitting on your phone whilst they're curled up next to you, which is obviously
has its place.
But it's like you're giving them all your full attention, aren't you?
And yes, it does have its place. And when I'm doing that, I give Judge nice chews, because that proper back teeth chomping, that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
So when you get their little blissy eyes that go all rolling backwards. I've struggled to find things that are going to entertain Judge for long, or like he's not going to chew up and eat in 5 seconds. Similar for Arlo. Arlo's not as into the longer lasting ones, is he?
No.
Judge really does love,
unless they're stinky, they've got to be stinky.
But even then,
but most of the stinky things, they go quick. But raw meaty bones.
Yeah, raw meaty bones, which obviously mostly you'd want to have in the garden.
Yeah.
Or
a crate on a towel, like if your dog's crate trained.
Can do that. Judge likes calves' hooves, or I've got like bull horns, buffalo horns.
Yeah.
He likes stuff like that, like that he can but he will only do those. He'll only really do those with me. In company,
yeah.
And it's like the same with Arlo.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Like he won't, he doesn't really bother with them, but then sometimes, but as soon as I go in to spend time with him, he's like, right, where's my chew?
Yeah.
And he'll lay down and have a nice chew.
I hear that so much, like in terms of like, particularly if people are like leaving their dogs at home to go to work or to go to the supermarket for a few hours or whatever, and you know, they'll leave their dog something nice when they go out. And they'll say, we just need it till I get back. And I think it is quite typical. Like, yeah, if I leave Arlo with chew, I'll come home from work. He's very clearly been asleep, has a big stretch. I sit down on the sofa, he gets his chew, comes and sits next to me. He's I can eat this now. Yeah. Now I've got company.
Does he eat like things that are short?
Yeah.
He'll eat treats or
he'd eat food if I left it. Yeah.
Things and stuff like that. He'll eat that without me. But, he does he likes company for when he's like settling down. It's like, nice relaxing time.
You've obviously just made it like a bit of a bonding thing as well.
I really, well, this is slightly off topic, but I think one of the most important things you can teach a dog is to do nothing as well.
Yeah.
Particularly coming from rescue. So working in rescue, I'm For those that don't know, I'm senior behaviourist for UK's largest rescue. Not the senior, I'm one of them. Not promoting myself. And something that we often see with dogs that have been kennelled for long periods of time is that they have absolutely no idea how to chill when they're with people, because they're like, obviously they're doing nothing in their kennels the whole time. You get them out, you want to give them a good time, you want to have fun with them, you're training, you're playing, and then they go back in the kennel and they do nothing. So it's sometimes a really tricky transition for them, and it's something that as a behaviourist in a rescue I am aware of, and I try and teach people how to do that. And we get things like, we have volunteers that come and read outside their kennels, like sit down and just read next to them while they're doing their thing. So there are kind of steps towards helping them with that transition. But Judge, having been in police kennels especially, which I don't think probably would have got a huge amount of much, he was seized at 3 days old, so he was seized with his whole litter and grew up with them, and he would go out with some of them. So each time he was going out, he was probably just...
Something fun was going to happen.
Fun was happening.
Yeah.
So he struggled a little bit when we were first kind of together, just being like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so that was... So the giving him something to do while I'm just there, because we can't be doing all of the time. I want him to be able to relax and hopefully one day integrate him into household with me. I know some of his siblings that have some of his siblings were found not type, and that's a whole different conversation. But so some of them were not type and they're in a rescue and they're still really struggling. One of them has only just been able to go out for a walk, and she was out longer than Judge has been. So like it's a tricky old thing for them. Judge has done so well. He's very resilient.
Yeah.
He's like, are we doing this together, Mum? I'm like, yeah. And then we just crack on and he does this. He's such a good boy. But I feel like that's
answered the question, really.
Well, yeah, there's obviously a lot to crack on with there for whoever is asked. Yeah,
there's your starting point.
There's a lot to do. What's the next question? Hope it's a biggie.
Well, kind of similar. What are the best breed-specific outlets for bull breeds? But I suppose not so much focused on the indoor element. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking like, broader than that, obvious, GRC.
Well, if people want more of an in-depth look at GRC and the founder of it, I did a podcast episode interviewing Jane Jack, who was the founder of GRC. So that's obviously like an hour-long episode that they can listen to specifically on it. But in a nutshell, GRC is our favourite thing to do with bull breeds, and it is based on 4 drive sports and a social responsibility test. So GRC stands for Gameness, Relationship, Control. Gameness is like persistence through resistance, and we will credit that to Linnea from GRC
Thank
Scotland.
you, Linnea.
So persistence through resistance. Do they want that toy enough that they're willing to scale up a wall to get it? Yeah. And will they do they have that grit that lots of bull breeds enjoy, kind of
overcoming adversity really to almost get the prize.
So that's kind of the gameness element. There's obviously relationship, so relationship is the most important thing for us and our training, and often what we're doing when we're going in and working with people is actually it's a relationship issue, and we're helping them work through that, or just strengthening relationship. But GRC does take a lot of relationship, because the dog's got on a wall climb, it's got to trust you're going to catch him. And obviously...
Not that they necessarily think about that when they're in the air.
No,
well, Arlo doesn't. He doesn't think, who's going to catch me?
No, I don't think he'd mind if he did. But anyway, but it's also like the way people, they're coming to you because they're like, oh, we're doing this together. Yeah. It's just a very together sport. You're on the same team. So whereas other kind of... GRC is not a bite sport. We don't consider it a bite sport. We consider it it's play, essentially.
And like the spring pole, obviously, is different to tug, because with tug, you're the opponent, whereas actually in spring pole, you two are kind of on the same team. You're like their cheerleader and you're cheering them on. So,
And so there's wall climb.
Yeah.
Spring pole, which is vertical tug.
Vertical tug, where you're on the same team.
You're on the same team. There's weight pull, and there is mill race. So those are the 4 drive sports, and I feel like there's something in GRC for every dog.
Yeah,
even the SR test, it's there to test every kind of dog. So there is a loose lead walking section. For the SR stands for social responsibility. And in order to compete in any of the drive sports, you have to have passed the social responsibility test, which is what myself and Libby are both working towards. It's going to happen. 2025 is our year.
I mean, we were out there training it in the rain today.
Absolutely.
We're obviously dedicated.
We are. Judge has got a very pushy front now. He's got a fantastic in, working on his down in motion. Don't really need that yet. That's for SR3, but I'm training for it.
Yeah.
So there's three levels for each of the drive sports and for the SR. But the SR, social responsibility test, there is a loose lead walking section, there is an obedience section, and there is a liberty section. And if you've got a really high drive dog, like an Arlo, they're going to smash that obedience section, but struggle more with the liberty section when they've got 2 minutes where they've just got to be good boys and girls, make good choices without us really interfering with them at all. You lose points for them. The more interference you give them, the more you lose points. And the loose lead walking section, you have to do things like you have to be able to greet 3 people. You've got to then do some loose lead walking, which is really nice.
And the dog can't be under a heel cue.
No.
So I can't ask Arlo for a focused heel. So again, you know, it's...
I mean, you can...
I could, but I'd sacrifice points for it.
Yeah.
So obviously you can be kind of strategic, but equally, like, if you don't want to... I mean, is it cheating? It's not really cheating, but you know what I mean? Like, if you want to do it properly, you want the dog to behave nicely on a lead just because they're on a lead. And, you know, you want them to not pounce all over people when you shake their hand, not because you've asked them for sit or you've taught them an auto sit, just because they know that that's not socially appropriate.
Yeah. So the social responsibility test is there to make sure that dogs that are competing in the drive sports are socially responsible dogs. Yeah. And I think it's such a good starting point for any training. Yeah. Like, if you can do all of the things in the SR, you are set. Like, you've got a good dog that you can navigate the world. Totally. With.
And a good quote, actually, because I was listening to Jay Jacks of the Next Level Dogs podcast, the latest episode yesterday when I was driving. And he said, it's not his quote, I think it might be Chad Mackin quote, I'm not 100% sure, but he said, you're not done training your dog until you can trust them when they're at liberty, which is kind of key, isn't it? Because actually, whilst you can teach your dog all this obedience and to follow instruction and use that to navigate situations, ultimately everybody kind of wants a dog that, even after you've taught all of that, you don't necessarily need it and the dog starts to make the right decisions for themselves. So I think that's just a really good way of looking at it.
It's a dog you can probably like live with. Yeah. Take places, do stuff with. Like, I think it just opens up your world so much. So that's the social responsibility element. You've also got to do a 2-minute down stay in which the dog's owner has to go and greet another dog.
Go out of sight.
There are other distractions, things like throwing toys, or I can't remember if it was in one of the higher levels of the SR, but there's things like popping balloons or a leaf blower or people falling on the ground doing some press-ups, like as if they're...
Just like lots of novelty.
Yeah, picnic. Yeah. Things like that. I think someone dragged an open pizza box in front of the dog. Like, it's hardcore distractions. So, it's you have to be able to proof your cues to the best of your ability.
Yeah. Without knowing exactly what's going to be thrown at your dog. Yeah. At least in the later stages anyway. Yeah.
So obviously, I think the question was more bull breed specific, like what are the best things for...
Best outlets,
outlets for bull breeds. And I feel like every element is really within GRC. GRC is big in America, and there's clubs in Australia. There's not that many in the UK, but it's hopefully growing a little bit more. So there's a few in Scotland now. Don't think there's any in Wales, but there's there's quite a few up north, and then there's 3 of us, I think, down south. So we were around, and I think there's one in Plymouth. We've got one in Dorset, and there's one in Surrey. Yeah. Though I'm not sure if the Border Reaver one is going on, but Chris Reliable has now got one in Nottingham. Yeah. Then there's Fife, Edinburgh, and I don't know where Bullies is, but I'm guessing somewhere else, Scotland. And Surrey. Did I say Surrey?
You did say Surrey.
Yeah. So we're dotted around. So you can come for a taste session. But all of the things that within GRC you can do, I wouldn't be doing any wall climb stuff out of this very specific context of GRC classes in the place where you're going to train.
Yeah.
I know people do, but it's not something I would particularly encourage. I don't think it's necessary. Spring pole, you can get brackets for your wall for a spring pole.
It's so easy to makeshift that.
So
like,
easy to make.
Even some secure fields you go to, like, have like a tug toy, like just attached to a tree.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same setup because you can't really release the toy to the dog for them to like actually win it, but they can still get a lot out of it.
Yeah. I'd say if you're doing stuff like this at home, one of the main points I'd encourage you to have is a start and finish cue. Like, before you do any of this stuff, if you can't within your own play get your dog to chill out or stop, then I'd be cautious about taking it like to a park. I personally wouldn't do any spring pole stuff in a public area. I think because it, partly because of the optic for other people, like they're just, I think if you're not doing it right, you shouldn't be doing it at all.
Yeah.
Partly, but also because it's quite a high arousal thing, particularly for a bull breed to be doing. Not particularly like, but this sport was made for bull breeds.
Made for them. It's tapping into something, isn't it?
So it's really high arousal. So if you've got another dog running up when you've got your dog on a spring pole.
Yeah, because you've also got to appreciate that what your dog is doing
looks fun.
It looks fun. It's weird, so it's novel, and novelty attracts attention from other people, dogs, children, like whatever it might be. So, I mean, unless you think your dog you've been doing it for a long time and your dog is shit hot and you're like proving at the final stage and you feel safe in that setting, it's not necessarily something I would be doing, not least if it's just for the aesthetic, which, rightly or wrongly, it exists. So we just, it's there, isn't it?
It's a tricky one. So like we do drag work. And drag work is where it's like one of the conditioning stages for weight pull. So drag work is you get a custom made harness and you've got your dog in the harness, you warm them up, you do everything that you need to do properly, and then they drag chains, primarily just because it's the easiest and safest thing for them to drag. And I take judge, but I'm mostly walking quiet places.
Yeah.
However, I walk him after I've done my warm up and everything. I walk him down my road towards the track for the forest where we do it, and he can be dragging down that road. And I've had a few cars slowing down, people's heads out the window, like clearly wondering what on earth I'm doing with the dog. But that, I feel like it's people. It looks weird to people, but I've got all my ready-made. Oh yeah, no, it's just like CrossFit for dogs, like
just canine resistance training.
Canine resistance training, which is, I think, it sounds nicer than drag work.
Yeah.
But a lot of what we're doing is like you don't want to come kind of with people being defensive and ready for an argument. Like you want to win people round and for them to understand what we're doing, because I think people are frightened of things they don't understand. So I have been accused in the past of playing a part in kind of making a negative aesthetic around bull breeds, and even with drag work, which I think is, I work with a physio, I've got an acupuncturist, hydro, I'm doing things properly. I've got a custom made harness, waited months for it, paid a lot of money for it, like invested in doing it properly. And so I would encourage others to also invest in doing it properly. You can't just do drag work on a canicross harness or on a whatever, just a normal harness. You need something custom made, because you're putting resistance on them, and if it's uncomfortable for them, you're going to be changing their gait, which can cause problems. Like, you've got to do it properly. But drag work done properly is good for the dog. It's like they're working through, it's just strength training. It's just strength training and resistance training. So you're getting them kind of working through that, like anybody does. You're working through that threshold of, well, this is a bit hard, and getting through it. But Yeah, so the optics of things, I am sensitive about it, just because I want people to understand, and I want people to come.
Yeah, we want people to come around to it.
Yeah.
So you don't want to necessarily go in like all guns blazing, like, you know, it's fine that we're doing this in a public park. Like, you just need to understand that, you know, you don't really want to be getting into those sort of conversations in public, really.
No. And if you've got a dog like Arlo who fucking screams like a banshee. And a lot of Bulburies do. I had a really lovely client who went to a secure field this week, and there's a spring pole set up-ish thing, like just a toy hanging from, I don't know if it's a tree or a pole or something. And her dog jumped and that's the thing with GRC, we're not training. Like, there's a very little training that goes into the drive sports to get them to do it. You just show them the toy and they do it.
It was like the comment I had, wasn't it, about should I really be teaching Arlo to climb up walls or fences? Like, I don't need a guard dog. And I was like, I did not teach Arlo to do this. He scaled the 6-foot fence of a secure field when he was like 10 months old.
Yeah.
I did not teach him to do that.
No, you've taught him not to do that.
I've taught him not to do that by putting it on cue and giving him an outlet to do it.
But so her dog jumped up, just saw the toy, jumped up on the toy, started dragging it and started screaming.
Yeah.
And she freaked out, thought he was in pain, called him off it. He came off, which, like, that's skills for him to be enjoying. And I had to kind of talk her through the fact that that's probably not, like, he's probably having the time of his life. And he's just, like, been desperate for something like that proper outlet that lets them jump. And it's part of, like, that hanging. And Arlo does the hula. Judge is more of a... Judge, like, more grunts and shuffles. I don't know what his style is.
He does more maths than Arlo.
He does do more maths with his little boss eyes.
When shall I go for it?
Yeah, he takes his time. Like, he makes sure
he's more thoughtful.
He's trying to accurately... And he's on a cowhide. That just... Because he's more foodie than toy-based. Yeah. That's, for him, has been really, like, instrumental in his spring pole stuff, working on his toy drive. But it's so thin, he's really got to do the maths, because he's...
The surface area that he's got to grab, like...
He's got double vision.
And look at his vision.
If people haven't seen my dog, they have to go look him up. Whereas Arlo, very little self-preservation, just smashes.
Zero. Yeah.
Smashes and finds his way and does the hula. He loves it. But if you're not doing GRC stuff, because I'm sure we could do a separate thing on our GRC journey. We run Jurassic GRC, by the way, in Dorset. Hopefully with a new location.
In October, I know, how exciting. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Then we can do it in all weathers and not have to call off if it's raining.
Yeah. Because, again, we won't do spring pole if it's slippy and raining, because we're responsible adults and we want the best for the dogs, so we don't want them slipping all over the place. But, yeah, if you don't want to be doing GRC, even just playing tug with your dog is an outlet that lots of them love. And, again, tug seems to have become a little bit controversial. I've been called out by people for playing tug with dogs, and I think people think that I think it cures all grabbing, but no, that's if you've got a really grabby dog, tug is something that we'll do with them if appropriate. So we want to make sure that grabbing is not coming from a place of insecurity or pain or other stuff. Like we can understand whether a grabby dog is doing it because they're just, like, fizzy and need an outlet, or if they're doing it from other reasons, because there can be other reasons behind grabby dogs. But tug in general,
I think just learning to play with your dog. And I also think that there's a bit of a perception that your dog's just, like, maybe not into play. And I'm not saying that there obviously aren't dogs out there that exist that are just not play or toy motivated, but appreciating that it actually does sometimes take quite a while to establish, like, a truly, like, cooperative, like, play experience with your dog. It's not necessarily something that comes naturally to dogs, especially if you've not done it since they were a puppy, or you've not had your dog since they were a puppy, or if you've got to adapt the play for various reasons. For example, like if your dog's sore and you can no longer play in exactly the same way, like, you know, you might have to make sort of, like, adaptations to the way you play. And yeah, that can take time. Or you might have a dog that's like happy to play indoors, but then struggles, or even in the garden, but then struggles like on walks to find it as motivating as they do when they're indoors. And, you know, there can obviously be lots of reasons for that. Like if the dog's just, highly stimulated by the environment and lots of competing motivators, the dog might not feel safe enough to play outside. So there's a lot that, you know, goes into it and you've sort of got to work through. But yeah, I do get quite a lot of clients who sort of send videos and check, you know, they're growling, like, are they just playing? Which I just, I find it really endearing now, because I'm just like, send me the video, and then I send it along, they're playing. They're loving it. I'm not sure about the growling. Like when I play fetch with them, they don't growl. Yeah, because they're not loving fetch. Play tug. I mean, but even with fetch, there's like variations that you can do to it. So for example, with Arlo, he doesn't really enjoy traditional fetch. However, through experimentation, which is a lot of what play is about, really experimenting and finding obviously what works for you, what works for your dog. You know, actually just going back, obviously you mentioned like adaptations for the dog, also adaptations for the human. Like if you're playing with somebody who's like older or more frail or shorter or in a wheelchair or, you know, with not great mobility, like, anyway, so backtracking a little bit there.
The thing about GRC is that
anybody can do it, all inclusive. But yes, so with, Ola doesn't like traditional fetch, but through experimentation, I discovered that actually building the anticipation for him, so putting him in a stationary position, like a down, for example, and then throwing the toy or going and hiding it somewhere and then sending him to go and get it. For him, he loves that. But actually, you would think, but with his breed, that him chasing after the ball to get it, to then bring it back, would be more rewarding, but it's not.
No.
So you've got to, you know, experiment and figure out what works for your individual dog. He also loves, like you mentioned earlier, like indirect rewards. So again, it's something about the anticipation element where, you know, if I obviously put him in a down and I throw the toy out and then I'll ask him to do a behaviour, he's itching to go and get that toy. But he finds that really rewarding as well. But then sometimes if you're not sure where to start, if you've seen what your dog's like around prey, that can sometimes be a good indication about what they're going to enjoy. Because again, for Arlo, you know, he should have like the full prey sequence in terms of like he should want to bring things down and, you know, shake and kill. But actually he doesn't. No. He's actually quite happy with almost like a flush, and a very short chase. Yeah. And then he'll come straight back. Yeah. So he doesn't really pursue prey, which might explain why he doesn't really actually enjoy, chasing after a ball and actually picking it up and bringing it back to me.
He's also such a good boy that just wants to please his mummy.
Yeah, he does also think, oh no, I don't want to lose her. I better go back. Mummy wouldn't let me. These deer can wait for another day. Obviously, we do not promote chasing deer. But yeah, I think watching your dog.
Out of a bush on your walk when you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Holly, you can do about it.
Yeah.
But I think he's also, he's not in full predation. He's just like, it's play, like it's fun.
He's having fun, yeah, and you can definitely see that, you know, like just even in terms of like, you know, chasing birds, it's just very much like they just move up into the air and then he's like, oh well, I'm going to circle back to you now. And I'm sure sometimes he just, did I do good? Sometimes he almost like looks at the bed then looks at me like, I'd rather come back to you.
Yeah.
If you call me now, I will come back to collect some treats. But yeah, watching your dog and like, you know, what they're like and what, I mean, if they've always obviously got their nose to the ground, again, which Arlo does, so he likes the tracking element, then actually searching for something is arguably going to be more fulfilling to them than actually chasing something. So yeah, don't necessarily get restricted by what breed of dog you've got, because they're all individuals at the end of the day. And that's been a bit of a learning for me with Arlo. But yeah, I mean, having a good retrieve is good. It's really good for recall. Because it's just sort of almost encouraging that you go out and you come back, you go out and you come back. So yeah, I do, and I like teaching. I do like teaching a retrieve, but yeah, you can also play around with, you know, what you give the dog when they bring the toy back. So when they bring the toy back, if what they really like the best is tug, and you tug with them when they bring the toy back, that's another thing. If Arlo will retrieve, if I then play tug with him afterwards, but if I just take it off him and throw it again, third throw, he's like, you throw it all the way over there, you go and get it. Like, but if I tug with him, which is what he really wants, then the tug is actually reinforcing
the coming back.
The retrieve, which is the bit that he doesn't like the best. Or equally, if you've got a dog that's more into food than they're into toys, then you can obviously reinforce them bringing the toy back by not throwing the toy again, but actually asking them to drop the toy and then giving them some food. So yeah, there's loads of ways you can play around with it, and I think that's probably an episode in itself for us to go into. But yeah, we'll do more stuff on play. But yeah, play with your dog.
Play with your dog and have a start and a finish cue.
Have a start and a finish cue.
We use READY.
READY, we do. And I put RU before just because I'm extra. You don't. You just use READY, whereas I say RU. READY. Yeah. And we're not saying it out loud because both our dogs are in their crate fast asleep being good boys. Yeah. And we've obviously got such a charged up start cue that if we were to say it now, they'd be like, get me out of here. But that's what you want. You want the passion for it, don't you?
You want to spell it. Arlo will learn that spelling soon enough.
Yeah.
He knows the intake of breath before you're going to say something. So
I know. And I pretend sometimes as well. He knows the difference between me pretending and me actually going to say it. It's such a little
clever boy.
Clever git.
He's a clever boy. But yeah, and a finish cue. I use. You
use enough, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I use all finished.
Yeah. Cute.
Yeah. So I have had clients before that have already used enough, but their enough is more like their no, let's be honest. It's more like enough. And I'm like, I'm not trying to go for that vibe. We're just trying to say that opportunity is now closed. It's no longer on the table. You're not in trouble. But you're not like, Judge, enough. You're just like, you actually say, I know exactly how you say, you go, enough. It's literally like that, enough.
Yeah, enough. But he knows something's happening. Yeah,
he's like, what are you enoughing me for? You haven't even given me anything.
Tone.
Yeah.
It's like your vibe.
Yeah.
And the word comes before the action. So the word comes before you get the toy out. The word comes before you finish playing.
Yeah.
Like you say it and then it shuts down. It's it literally is like a start and a stop button.
Yeah.
And that's how I taught it, is literally just through repetition.
Yeah, you're just labelling a window of that the dog's already about to enter.
Yeah.
You just label it, then produce the toy. Initially, they're obviously not going to bat an eyelid at the phrase, but after 3 days, that phrase, the toy on play always follows that phrase. They start getting the anticipation as soon as they hear the phrase.
Exactly. Like not many people have trained their dogs walkies.
No.
But say the word walkies, they're all like fizzing and ready. And you can also do the same thing with the start and the stop cue.
Yeah.
And it kind of, when I say the word, I become the thing as well. Like I kind of turn on as well.
Yeah.
And the same with when I say the finish cue, I'm like,
dogs are smart.
Dogs are smart.
Like think about some of like the best cues that you have. Like I reckon like one of the most reliable cues I see that clients have, which they've never actually taught, never really rewarded, is just this way.
Mm-hmm.
They just go this way.
Or getting your shoes on.
And then you just change direction and the dog's like, oh, I better follow. Yeah, exactly. Putting your shoes on, picking up the lead. Like, you're not taught any of this stuff. Like,
no, they're clever. And...
like, Arlo knows my pub shoes. Like, I don't go to the pub very often. Not now that I can make Amaretto sours so well at home. Can't I, Bethany?
Yeah.
But, yeah. But if I put on, like, going out shoes, like, his demeanour is not the same as if I put on my Crocs. Like...
yeah.
Really confusing when I wear Crocs to the pub, which I also do sometimes. But Crocs going on means
weddings. Well, I'm not even joking. Yeah, I didn't for the ceremonies, guys.
Fair.
The dancing bit is going to be comfortable. I have lost all dignity.
Yeah.
And all care for what people think. Crocs are comfortable.
I think if you want to do GRC in a public park with your bull breed, you need to probably not care what people think.
True. But I won't be doing it with my bull breed because it'll be muzzled.
And in fairness, excuse.
That's very loud.
I know, I'm really sorry. I probably also wouldn't do agility with a border collie in a public park either.
No.
It's more the arousal element and being like, respectful of other people that are also using that space. Just like I also wouldn't let Arlo chase birds, on a very busy beach you know, going past children, people and other dogs, even though he's not going to go up to children, people or other dogs. It's the, like, what did you say? The optic. Like, I just don't think it's respectful, really.
No, that's true.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's anything wrong with them doing that. That's just my rationale for why I wouldn't do it, and other examples of also things that I wouldn't do.
Yeah, being respectful.
Yeah,
we are good, respectful people.
Because we are, and also we do want to change the perception of bullies, and we're not going to do that by just being like, you know, we're just going to do whatever we want and not care. Like, yeah, I think I'd rather take a slightly more gentle approach. Demure. Mindful and demure approach. Let's be demure. Let's be mindful, guys. And yeah, that's all we've probably got time for today.
Yeah, on that demure and mindful note.
How many questions did we get through? 2. Blimey, O'Reilly.
Was it only 2?
Yeah. Indoor stuff would you recommend for bullies who can't get out as much due to not liking the muzzle? And what are the best breed-specific outlets for bull breeds? But we did also talk about GRC, which were some other questions that we had. So, yeah.
Amazing.
We have got, still loads of questions to get through.
Well, this is season 2, episode 1.
Yeah.
So there'll be lots more episodes. So thank you for listening. I've been Bethany. This has been Libbi, my wonderful new co-host.
Not new anymore. Oh, I'm new to
co-host,
I suppose. Yeah.
Not new to Bulbury Behaviourist. But yeah, you can find us at Bulbury Behaviourist on Instagram, Facebook. We have a new website that we've not really launched yet, but it's bull-breed.com. So you can go there. It's not completely finished, just as a caveat.
By the time we release this, it will be finished.
Yeah. So yeah, you can have a look on bull-breed.com, bull-breed.com. And you can email us at hello@bull-breed.com. I think that's most of the places people can find us.
Yeah.
And our new YouTube channel, Bulbury Behaviourist.
Yeah.
Which hopefully people are watching on. So thanks very much for listening or watching. Hope you have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.